Another round over here.
I'll take care of this lady's goods.
Thank you kindly, mister.
Evening drifted across Dust Creek like smoke from a dying fire. The sun had already begun to sink, turning the sky into a burnt-orange sea above the open plains. The trading post stood at the edge of town, a tired wooden building crouched beneath the wind, its lanterns flickering, its sign creaking like an old man's bones. Inside, the air smelled of tobacco smoke, leather oil, and spilled whiskey. Cowboys with weathered faces leaned on the counter, laughter spilling from cracked lips. Boots clattered. Coins rang. The sound of commerce was a kind of music here, the hymn of the West. Then the door opened, and a hush settled for half a heartbeat. An old woman stepped in, small, bent-backed, her shawl threadbare and gray with dust. Her boots were split at the seams, her eyes sunken yet alert, like an ember that refused to die. The room's warmth did not reach her. She moved carefully, as though each step might crack the fragile world beneath her feet. She went to the counter and laid down 3 coins, dull, worn thin from too many years of exchange. "Evenin', Mr. Pike," she whispered, voice like dry leaves in wind. "I'll be needin' a bit of flour, and some salt, if you've got any left." Harlan Pike, the trading post owner, a thick man with a face carved from disdain, looked her over without smiling. "Salt costs money, Miss Calloway. Flour, too. You know how it works. I'll have the rest for you by week's end. He slammed his ledger shut. "Ain't running no charity here. You pay now, or you take your leave." A few men snickered near the whiskey barrel. Someone muttered, "Old Martha's back, begging again." Laughter followed, short, sharp, and cruel. She stood still under it, her frail hands gripping the edge of the counter like a woman holding on to the last piece of earth. "Please," she said, barely louder than a breath. "I worked the land all my life. Ain't got much left, but—" "You had land once," Pike interrupted, his tone cutting like cold steel. "Now you got debts. You best be movin' along before I lose my patience." The room went quiet again, not from pity, but from boredom. Martha Calloway gathered her coins, her face ghostly pale in the lamplight. Her eyes flicked toward the floor, not in shame, but in something deeper. That quiet kind of hurt only the unseen carry. And that's when he saw her. Elias Boone, a ranch hand with dust in his beard and sorrow in his shoulders, had been standing near the door, hat in hand. He was young, maybe 30, but the years had already worn him down to the bone. He worked sunup to sundown for the McCready Ranch, slept in a shed, and sent what little he earned to a sister back east. He had learned to keep his head down, to let the world pass him by. But that night, something in the way the old woman stood, quiet, proud, humiliated, struck a nerve deep inside him. He stepped forward, his boots echoing against the wood floor. The laughter stopped. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a single silver coin, his pay for 3 days' work. He placed it on the counter without a word. The coin clinked like thunder in the silence. "Add her flour and salt to my tab," he said softly. Harlan Pike's mouth twisted. "You sure about that, Boone? Ain't got much yourself." Elias met his eyes, calm, steady. "Ain't about what I got. It's about what's right." Someone at the back coughed awkwardly. Another man shifted in his chair. Even laughter felt like a sin now. Martha turned, her eyes glassy but alive again, 2 wet stones glinting beneath the storm. "Son, you didn't have to. Reckon someone should have long ago," he said, voice barely above the creak of the wind. For a long moment, the two of them just stood there, a poor ranch hand and a forgotten widow, 2 souls bruised by the same hard world, sharing a small piece of grace no one else understood. She took the small sack of flour in trembling hands. Before leaving, she turned once more toward Elias, her voice frail but full of something fierce and ancient. "Kindness always comes home, boy, one way or another." And then she stepped out into the dying light. The door closed behind her. The wind outside caught the edge of the lantern flame, making it flicker and strain, as though even the night itself had been moved. Elias lingered by the counter. Pike muttered under his breath, counting the coins again. "Fool boy," he said. Ain't no profit in pity. Elias didn't answer. He walked out into the chill air, hat pulled low, the last sliver of sun setting fire to the horizon. For a moment, he saw her silhouette far down the dusty road, small against the immensity of the plains. A shape so fragile, it looked as if the whole world might swallow her whole. He stood there a long while, watching until she vanished beyond the ridge. When he finally turned back toward the stable, the night was falling, ash beneath the horizon, soft and endless. Somewhere out there, coyotes began to howl, and the wind carried a faint whisper that sounded almost like her words. Kindness always comes home. The week after the trading post, the plains changed their color. The sky grew heavy, the wind colder, and the earth itself seemed to brace for something unseen. By the time the first thunder rolled across Dust Creek, Elias Boone was already out fixing the McCready Ranch fences, his coat soaked and his hands raw from rope burns. He worked alone in the rain, always alone, a silhouette of endurance against a sky that wouldn't stop weeping. The storm grew cruel, tearing through the valley with sheets of lightning and wind that howled like spirits remembering their pain. By dusk, Elias was riding back toward town when he saw it, a wagon overturned by the creek bed, its wheel half buried in mud. The mule was gone. The rain fell hard enough to blur the world into streaks of gray. He slid off his horse, boots sinking deep into the soaked ground. "Hello. Anyone there?" he called. Then he heard it, a soft, broken groan beneath the storm. Pushing through the wreckage, he found Martha Calloway, pinned beneath a splintered wheel. Her shawl was torn, her face pale, her leg twisted unnaturally. Without hesitation, Elias braced his shoulder against the wheel and heaved. The wood creaked, mud sucking at his boots. With a cry of effort, he freed her, lifting her into his arms as the wind whipped them both. "Hold on, ma'am. I got you." "Elias," she whispered weakly. "Reckon kindness found me quicker than I thought." Her faint smile was enough to keep him moving. He carried her to the old Whitlow homestead, long abandoned since the drought years, a skeleton of a house standing against the storm. Inside, the roof still held, mostly. He built a fire from half-wet timber, smoke curling into the rafters like ghosts set free. When the flames caught, the shadows drew close, and for the first time, he saw her face clearly. The years had carved deep lines, but there was beauty still, the kind that comes from having survived everything that should have broken you. She winced as he bound her leg with a torn strip from his shirt. "Ain't much of a doctor," he muttered. "Ain't much of a patient," she replied, managing a small laugh that cracked the silence wide open. They sat there for a while, listening to the rain hammer the roof. The world outside had vanished. It was just them, the fire, and the soft ticking of survival. Then, slowly, the conversation turned to what the town didn't know. She told him about the past, Calloway Ranch, her family's land. How her husband died trying to save their barn from lightning, and her son, just 17, followed him into the flames. How grief left her too hollow to fight when Harlan Pike forged the deed transfer. "Signed it right out from under me," she said. "Told me it was a loan contract. By the time I learned the truth, I didn't have a cent or a soul to stand with me." Elias's jaw tightened. The firelight flickered against his face, and in it, a silent rage, not wild or loud, but deep and righteous. "You built that land. He's livin' off your sweat." "Ain't just mine any more," she said softly. "The earth don't belong to any of us. It just remembers who treated it kind." She looked at him then, really looked, and her eyes seemed to pierce straight through the dust and wear in him. "You've got the same look my husband used to wear, a man too proud to cry and too honest to quit." He smiled faintly, staring into the fire. "Pride don't feed a man much, ma'am." "No," she said, "but kindness will if you let it." Outside, thunder cracked again. He took her cup, an old tin mug, and refilled it from the kettle, careful, almost reverent. In the flickering glow, a quiet bond formed, not through words but through the stillness between them. Two wanderers, one worn by years, the other by disappointment, meeting halfway through their loneliness. As dawn broke, the storm softened into mist. The house was soaked, but the air smelled clean, that rare scent the land makes after surviving a beating. Elias rose to his feet. "I'll take you into town, ma'am. You need a doctor." "Not yet," she said, clutching his arm. "There's something I need to do first." He hesitated. "What's that?" "Stand up straight again," she said. "Been too long since I walked into that town lookin' like I still mattered." So he helped her onto his horse, one arm steadying her, and they rode through the gray dawn toward Dust Creek. The road was muddy, and townsfolk were already staring as they arrived, whispers trailing behind like dust clouds. "Look there," someone muttered near the post office. "That old Calloway woman again, and Boone the drifter." The eyes that had mocked them before now watched in stunned silence as Elias carried her through the mud toward the trading post. Clara Whitlow, the timid clerk, came running with a blanket. Pike froze behind the counter, his face paling when he saw them together. "You brought her here?" Pike stammered. "She ain't got anywhere else," Elias said. "You best mind your business, Boone." "Seems you already been mindin' hers long enough," Elias interrupted, his voice low but sharp. The room fell silent again, the same silence from that evening a week ago. Only this time, the shame didn't fall on her. It fell on everyone else. Clara, quietly trembling, stepped forward and placed a fresh loaf of bread into Martha's basket. No words, just the softest gesture of decency. A single spark in a cold room. Elias saw it, and so did Martha. Her lips quivered with something between sorrow and gratitude. When they left, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through clouds, pale and uncertain, but it was light all the same. Elias helped her into a wagon someone had lent them. Her fingers brushed his hand as she whispered, "The world's cruel, boy, but it ain't beyond repair. Not while hearts like yours still beat." He wanted to say something, anything, but words felt too small. He just nodded and tipped his hat as she smiled one last time, then looked toward the fields beyond town, where her land once breathed. Visual ending for Section 2. As she rides away, her shawl flutters like a torn flag reclaiming the wind. The camera pans down to her lap, where a folded, faded deed marked Calloway Ranch rests beneath her trembling hands. A promise waiting for the storm's dust to settle. The summer sun returned with a vengeance after the storm. The fields around Dust Creek shimmered gold again, the air thick with the hum of cicadas. To anyone passing through, life looked the same, wagons creaking, saloon doors swinging, the same men trading, laughing, forgetting. But something had shifted. Somewhere beneath the soil, the story had turned. It was Clara Whitlow who told Elias first. She found him mending fences behind the McCready barn one morning, shirt damp with sweat, the dust clinging to his skin. Her hands shook as she held out the folded paper. "She's gone, Elias," she whispered. "Martha Calloway passed in her sleep last night." Elias froze. The hammer slipped from his hand, striking the post with a dull thud. The sound carried far into the empty fields. He turned his face toward the horizon, that endless, merciless horizon, and closed his eyes. He didn't speak for a long while. When he did, his voice was rough, as if scraped by wind. "She said kindness always comes home," he murmured. "Didn't say how soon." Clara hesitated before adding, "Sheriff Crow asked me to find you. Said she left something behind for you." The letter. The sheriff waited under the big willow by the edge of town, where the old cemetery lay quiet and wind-worn. Crows circled above, their shadows gliding across the stones. Crow handed Elias a sealed envelope. The handwriting on it was frail, shaky. Martha Calloway scrawled across the front in faded ink. Elias broke the seal carefully. Inside was a letter, written in soft, trembling strokes. "Elias Boone. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I reckon you'll wonder why an old fool left you a letter. You see, boy, I owned more than folks remembered. The papers said otherwise, but truth has a way of hiding in plain sight. That ranch they stole, the land I was too broken to fight for, it's still mine. And now it's yours. The deed's in Sheriff Crow's care. I've written it proper. Use it kindly, Elias. Make the land breathe again. Don't let the good in you harden. Martha Calloway." The wind stirred as he read, carrying dust and the scent of sunburnt sage. He folded the letter with trembling hands, pressing it to his chest. Then he knelt by her small, simple grave, a wooden cross, no carving but her name burned faintly across it. "You ain't forgotten, ma'am," he whispered. "Not any more. The ranch returns." That same week, Sheriff Crow rode into town with the official deed, stamped and sealed by the county clerk. It declared Elias Boone the rightful heir of Callaway Ranch, over 200 acres of open plains and crumbling fences, the same soil Martha had once called home. Word spread faster than wildfire. At the trading post, Harlan Pike's face went pale as news reached him. "That's a lie," he barked, pounding his fist on the counter. "She signed it over to me." Sheriff Crow looked him dead in the eye. "You forged her grief, Pike. Now the law's caught up." There was no shouting, no brawl, no grand spectacle, just truth landing quiet and heavy, like a hammer that doesn't miss. And for the first time, silence felt like justice. Elias didn't gloat. He didn't speak a word to Pike. He just walked past him, boots steady, eyes calm, and went straight to the edge of the valley, to the gate still carved with the name Callaway. The ranch stood there waiting, fences half-rotten, grass overgrown, but still breathing beneath the wind. Elias stepped through the gate, knelt, and pressed his hand into the soil. It was warm, alive. He smiled faintly. "We'll start again," he murmured. "You and me both." The town transforms. In the weeks that followed, Elias rebuilt the house board by board. The townsfolk who once turned away began to come by, at first out of curiosity, then out of quiet remorse. Clara came with supplies, flour, beans, seeds, and a timid smile. "Could use some help in the garden," she said. "Reckon I could use some company," Elias answered. They worked side by side beneath the hot sun, speaking little, moving slow. The soil between them became its own language, one built on patience, not pity. Children from the edge of town came next, the ones with no fathers, no coin. Elias put them to work mending fences, feeding horses, patching roofs. He paid them in bread, shelter, and stories. And when they asked who Callaway was, he told them. "She's the reason you're standing on this land today. She's the reason we're all standin', truth be told." The ranch came alive again, green shoots pushing through dry soil, laughter echoing where silence used to sleep. And with every sunrise, Elias felt her presence, in the wind through the grass, in the creak of the old barn, in the warmth that never left the land. The final evening. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the horizon, Elias stood at the fence line. His hat rested against his chest. The land glowed before him, rows of wheat dancing in the light, the call of a distant hawk rising above the hills. He spoke softly, as if to the wind itself. "You were right, Martha. Kindness does come home. Took its sweet time, but it found its way." He turned toward the ranch house, now painted, alive with lamplight, and saw Clara standing on the porch, her hair catching the sunset. For a moment, the world felt small and perfect. He smiled, lifted his hat in quiet salute to the horizon, and walked back home. Epilogue: The Plains remember. Years later, travelers passing through Dust Creek would still talk about Callaway Ranch, the place where orphans found work, drifters found food, and no one was turned away. They'd say the soil there grew sweeter, the air a little kinder. Some swore they'd seen an old woman in a faded shawl standing by the fence at dusk, her eyes shining proud as she watched over the fields. And maybe that was true. Or maybe the land itself just remembers the ones who healed it. Final reflective paragraph. Poetic close. And that, my friend, is how the West keeps its promises, not through thunder or gunfire, but through small mercies that outlast the storms. Sometimes, the poorest hands carry the richest legacy. And sometimes, the soul you choose to help is the one that gives you back your name. So if ever you pass through Dust Creek and feel the wind on your cheek, listen close. You might just hear her whisper, soft as the dawn. Kindness always comes home. Fade to black. End.